Hi there. Welcome to Prices at the Pumps on SaltWire, our weekly look at all things energy related. I'm Scott Squires, joined as always by the energy expert, Dan McTagg. Dan, a couple of things to get to with oil on world markets and things of that nature. But first, we know what our audience likes to know right out of the gate. Where are prices headed? Newfoundland and Labrador sets their pricing tomorrow, Thursday. The rest of Atlantic Canada sets their pricing on Friday. First up, tell us what Newfoundland and Labradorians can expect tomorrow, and then the rest of Atlantic Canada on Friday. What's the news?
Well, for everybody, two words: hold off. Gasoline in Newfoundland should be down, according to market data, not the regulators who have their own methodologies, but by the methodologies that North America uses, and which I use for every other city in Canada. Gasoline should drop 5.9 cents a liter, diesel down 3.7. So if you're looking to fill up, you may want to hold off until midnight tonight in Newfoundland. And of course, in the rest of Atlantic Canada, so Nova Scotia should be down about 4 cents a liter for gasoline, roughly 3 cents for diesel, while in Prince Edward Island, the number will be a little bit more like a 2.5 to 3 cent decrease for gasoline and about a 2 cent decrease for diesel. New Brunswick, not very far off, probably about 3 cents, 3.2 cents a liter drop for gasoline and about a 2.4 cent drop for diesel. Again, every regulator has their own formula. They look at different methodologies to come up with that artificial synthetic price. These were all done at a time in which gas price prediction did not occur. Those gas price predictions are available anywhere in Canada except Atlantic Canada, which still lives in the 1970s and 80s when it comes to believing that somehow regulated prices is some form of security. In fact, in the case of Nova Scotia, it was actually created to protect a class of gas stations, independent rural gas stations, which no longer exist. So that aside, it's good news for consumers. Hold off until tomorrow and Friday, and you'll save yourself of bucks at the pumps.
Thank you for the kind of update where we're headed in the Atlantic region. And again, your predictions are quite spot on across the country. But as you mentioned, in Atlantic Canada with the utility and review boards, let's move on and talk about world markets. I know the last few days, oil was kind of taking a bit of a dip. It rallied somewhat. But what are you seeing with oil on the world markets and where you think it might be headed short term and maybe even long term?
Well, oil speculators and energy speculators, investors, usually driven by AI or money managers, don't do fundamentals. They used to. Supply and demand was really important. It always has been for pretty much any commodity. But today it's fretting over and really getting a bit of a hissy fit, I saw last week, because interest rates in the U.S. Fed weren't going to decline anytime soon, even though there's perhaps some evidence of a decline in demand, potentially because the economy there is starting to reel from significant amounts of inflation created by the Inflation Reduction Act of the Biden administration, pumping so much money in there, creating artificial inflation. There's some grave concern that might have a real problem for demand at some point down the road. But there's a big disconnect between reality and using, the kind of strategies that we're seeing from some of the big hedgers that are saying, oh, we should be looking at, the buy and sell, this constant churning that you don't normally do with a commodity. Commodity, you buy, you hedge, you sell, you take delivery. And in that kind of respect, you don't want to have that kind of volatility of choppiness up and down. But that's been a problem for about 10 to 12 years. It's getting worse now. And what's really happening is that we're now sort of seeing the full effects of oil dropping $5-6 a barrel at a time in which demand is increasing. We're heading towards summer demand season. We know there are geopolitical tensions globally. All those are being discounted and ignored. And while it's short-term gain for us as consumers, it's definitely going to be long-term pain because it disincentivizes people from actually producing the very thing that we need. And that's, oil, diesel, gasoline, jet fuel, and the like. If there is some kind of global recession, I want to hear about it because I'm not seeing that. Yes, there are slowdowns, but there also is, according to the the International Energy Agency, most importantly from OPEC and from a number of leading economists that are pointing to the fact that demand for hydrocarbons continues to rise, despite electric vehicles, despite mandates that would suggest otherwise. The fact is the world is going through more oil, not less. And when you produce less of it, or you disincentivize people from producing it, either through direct government intervention saying no more investment in oil, or you skew the market towards algorithms and AI and all these other things, you do untold damage to price discovery. And that has major implications for all economies around the world. Don't take my word for it. I've been hitting the horn on energy affordability in Canada for 5 or 6 years. No one really cared about it. They sure as heck do today.
You referenced OPEC, Dan, and their next meeting is June 1st. They're going to get together. You may not see OPEC in the headlines all the time, but they're still a major influencer when it comes to what's going to happen with oil prices, and which obviously affects the price at the pumps and for other energies. What do you think OPEC is thinking, and what might come out of this June 1st meeting in terms of production increase, decrease, staying the same?
I think OPEC wants $90 a barrel oil for Brent, so 85 for WTI. That we're getting 78 for WTI and 82, 83 for Brent means that there's likely to be a move by the membership, with some exceptions. There may be some grumbling here and there, especially from Russia, and for obvious reasons. It needs to finance its campaign, its invasion of Ukraine. But beyond that, I think there's clear evidence that the next OPEC meeting in a few weeks, following the launch of the official, beginning of summer driving season in the United States on the 27th of May, 20th here in Canada, we're going to see a continued tightening. There was an expectation that perhaps they would stop this withdrawal of about 2.5 million barrels of production per day at a time in which demand is rising. It sounds like they're going to stay the course at the very least. Some are even musing that they might cut another 500,000 or 1 million barrels. That 500,000 may represent the amount of new barrels coming to the market, Canadian oil, as a result of the completion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline 10 years late.
Dan, we've talked about it before, the $2 threshold, and there's so many things that can happen to determine whether we get closer to that or maybe fade away a little bit from it. Right now in Nova Scotia, paying around $1.84 for regular self-serve. But we all wonder, as consumers that are putting gas or diesel in our vehicles, especially gas, because we haven't really hit that $2 level in this region for gas. Dan, are you putting your bets on hitting that $2 a liter mark in Atlantic Canada sometime this summer? Or do you think maybe the winds are blowing that it may not go there? Just your best guess.
Yeah, I think we're going to hit it. It won't be because of the consistent, $2 a liter. I think we're good for another 10 to 15 cent a liter increase, if only because we do see summer demand issues. We do see hurricanes in the U.S. Gulf Coast that tend to, at least between, I would say, at the end of this month all the way to the end of October, does have and can play a significant influence on prices. So, for instance, if you were to have a hurricane hit the U.S. Gulf Coast, knocking out half of the U.S. refinery capacity for even a short period of time, that could cause a spike of anywhere from $4 to $10 a barrel. It could also see a number of, and this is critical this time of year, gasoline tends to have its own march to its own drummer. So the gasoline market may not always reflect what's happening on oil during the summer period because of that, huge demand. I would expect that prices here in Atlantic Canada will at days hit $2 a liter or come awfully close to it. But I think the normal will be more in the 190 range, barring anything that is unforeseen. And there's plenty in the summer that we don't actually and cannot possibly, calculate at this juncture.
Once upon a time, we thought we would never see 50 to 60 cent a liter gasoline. And then the pandemic hit, and we all know what happened with gas prices. Nobody could go anywhere anyway. But I remember seeing a gas sign, and it was like, I think 60.5. Those days obviously are long gone, barring some wild world event. But as we're around 180, 185, 186, hovering around $2, do you feel that the days of 130, 140, even 150 a liter may be a bygone era, Dan? What are your thoughts on that?
Mark, 20th, 2020, oil hit minus 37.68 a barrel for WTI. That's because they had no place to store it, and they were actually incentivizing storage to put that fuel somewhere during the pandemic. If you have governments helping themselves to 50 to 60 cents on a liter of gasoline, it's kind of impossible. Even if the gasoline prices were zero, you'd still be paying 60 to 65 cents a liter. And the commodity is not likely to drop to $40 a barrel anytime soon. That's another 45 cents a liter. Were there to be a drop of that nature as well, we would see the shrinking of the Canadian dollar. It would lose its value, to the point where add another 10, 15 cents to the price of gasoline. Any way you slice it, in Atlantic Canada, dropping below $1.20 is not going to happen unless there's a regime change in Ottawa, where you do get rid of all the carbon taxes, and there's a move afoot to try to make life more affordable by placing a lot more emphasis on the absolute primacy of energy affordability. In a country like ours, with the provable reserves that we have, I think of Newfoundland. Newfoundland has more oil than Norway. Norway's done extraordinarily well, multi-trillion-dollar sovereign fund, not running any major debts or deficits as a result. But when you have a nation that has as much energy as we do, and we don't use it or exploit it in the way the world would like us, because they're knocking on our door consistently, it's a real tragedy. And that real tragedy continues to play out in unacceptably high levels of energy pricing while we pursue this non-secular, or the secular religion of net zero and climate catastrophism. Unfortunately, it has a major cost, and it's going to be embedded in the price we pay for everything as long as we continue to go along with it.
Dan, we always appreciate your insights, your expertise here on prices at the pumps on SaltWire. But when you're not with us here, let people know where they can reach out to you, connect with you, engage with you, and just see the content that you create.
Yeah, affordableenergy.ca is our site. President at affordableenergy.ca is how you reach me. Of course, you can always see my work on Twitter. It's a lot of fun, not always about energy, but always willing to engage. So it's Gas Price Wizard. You can always look there. And if you want to know where gas prices are heading up, other than coming here in SaltWire and seeing us every week when we give the early predictions, go to gaswizard.ca.
Pleasure as always, Dan. And I am a follow on X, and I'm just happy to say that I have not yet, and I hope it never happens, been tossed in the green bin. And if folks don't know what I'm talking about, check out Dan on X, formerly Twitter, and you'll find out exactly what I mean. I've become quite familiar with that every now and then, Dan.
That GIF or GIF or whatever people call it is the most useful tool for a lot of useful people.
Well, Dan, all the best to you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Say hello to your mom, and have a great weekend. Almost May 2-4 weekend, Victoria Day weekend. But have a great weekend, and we'll do this again next week.
Wonderful. Thanks, Scott. And to all the mothers out there, happy Mother's Day.
Indeed. Happy Mother's Day. Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
Take care, Scott.